morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is J.R. Moore coming to you live from deep in the mountains of the Missouri Ozarks on Wednesday, the 14th day of March, year of our Lord 2018. Welcome to the John Moore Show. In prepper tip of the day, I got a twofer for you today. The first is one you've heard before. That is to get your night vision now. Get it now while you can. If you can only afford one piece of night vision, make sure it's a weapon sight, because there's more you can do with a weapon sight. More uses. The second prepper tip is a new brand I've just ran across this morning of merino wool sock. The brand name is Fit Sock, and that's Foxtrot India Tango Sierra Oscar Kilo. Foxtrot India Tango Sierra Oscar Kilo. I'll have some posted on my website under John Survival and Tactical Gear, probably by the end of the business day today. I'm a big fan of merino wool socks. I've got several pair I've been using in my weekly rotation that are more than 10 years old. They just last and they're very comfortable. The big news this morning, as far as headlines, there's a couple of headlines, let's see what there are. A lot of prognostications about the Pennsylvania election yesterday that had 0.2% difference between the Republicans and Democrats, and pretty insignificant. And then we've got the fairly well-known physicist Stephen Hawking has deceased at age 76. A number of other headlines. Yesterday's news was all filled up, of course, with the firing of the Secretary of State and the appointment of the new Secretary of State from the Director of the CIA. We have a patient waiting in the green room, my friend, Professor James McCanney. Professor McCanney is a credentialed astrophysicist. He has taught astrophysics at the university level at Cornell University. He taught mathematics at Cornell University. He's an amateur archaeologist, a prolific author, and weekly radio talk show host. Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, John. And sorry I missed last week. I was out of radio range, but back again this week and front and center.
Outstanding. Well, you've mentioned Stephen Hawking several times over the past year with your concerns that the statements attributed to him were possibly not actually coming from him. Obviously, that's over now, but at one time he was certainly looked at as one of the more brilliant physicists, wasn't he?
Yeah, and it's in that realm of Never Land physics. Physics that had it was just often mathematical Never Land. And even back in Tesla's day, Tesla said the same thing. He said physics has become, Tesla was in the laboratory hands-on, build it, make it work, and that's why they didn't like him, because he was doing real things, amazing things. But Stephen Hawking's, the problem was, I saw him decades ago in his chair at a conference, personally, in person, and he couldn't communicate then. This was decades ago, and this ALS was a debilitating disease. They were using him and misusing him and putting words in his mouth. Supposedly there was only one man that could communicate with him, and they twisted his personal story from what he said to something totally different. It's really a sham and a disgrace that the science news media would use this person with a debilitating disease and then put words in his mouth to promote their baloney. So anyway, now that he's dead, I suspect it will continue where they will dig up so-called writings of his out of the past. But even in spite of the fact that he officially died, which I think actually he died a long time ago, if he in fact was even alive for a long time, I doubt that. But they probably had to make it official now. But be that as it may, it'd be interesting if some researcher out there actually went in to see if there was an autopsy and actually a death report, that was real. John, I'm getting an awful lot of mic noise. I don't know what it is. It's like rubbing on a mic or something. I don't know if but anyway, this was a huge sham in science, and promoting the political atmosphere in science is so heavily weighed with the Big Bang and dark matter, and now they just did a separate study. These scientists used a second method. They're called, there's a type of star that is a variable, and they can use those to measure distance. And when they found these stars in other galaxies, they tried to match that with what the Big Bang redshift measurements gave, and they were totally, totally different. And so they invented now what they call dark radiation. Radiation that doesn't act normal in specific cases. It's so ludicrous. I mean, they have dark matter, they had dark energy, 98% of the universe was made out of things that they couldn't define or see or measure. And now that it was so far off, they had to invent a third one called dark radiation.
It sounds like they just make this stuff up as they go, Jim.
Oh, it's so absurd. It's so absurd. And the point is that they were using Stephen Hawking as a mouthpiece to support this, and quoting him as the most intelligent scientist of our time. And I'm sorry, but it's really a disgrace that science has to depend on a person who cannot communicate and exonerate him to the point of sainthood, living sainthood, to try and further their cause.
Well, what's really scary is that they, from your belief that they will continue to do so, finding messages and writings that he has written in the past, and then revealing them as it suits their needs.
Yeah, and that I guarantee you will continue. They're not going to let this one die with the man. If in fact he died, I think he was dead a long time ago. If not, he was, in terms of communication, basically uncommunicable. He was not there, and that was decades ago.
When he allegedly did communicate, what was the form of communication?
On his wheelchair, he had a stick, and so he could push it and apparently make letters and do communication like that. But ultimately, when I saw pictures, all you could see was his head. His hands were immobile. His whole body was immobile. And if he did live, he was, for at least a decade, completely unable to make any sort of communication at all. And when I released my book, The Diamond Principle, I did so on Coast to Coast AM, and they had a guy on there with me who was an apologist. It was like a bushwhacked on the radio, but basically who was an apologist for NASA. And the whole point of my book was that NASA is not the whole point, but part of the analysis is that we're spending all this money on NASA, which is a smokescreen, and its whole job is to prevent you from going into space, which you can see now that we have privatized space programs. You can see how easy it is to go into space. And with the billions and billions that NASA has every year, you can see that they don't have any ability to go into space. I just saw an article this morning how they're canceling the second version of what they call the SLS. It's the Heavy Launch NASA rocket. And they've canceled building the second one. So it'd be kind of like having numerous space shuttles. And right. So NASA isn't going to be there in 10 years. They might still be getting money, but in terms of viability and, the private space is just going to walk by them standing still or going backwards, whatever the case. NASA won't be there in 10 years, if even that.
Well, we got some wonderful things to thank NASA for, like Tang and space pens.
And Teflon. Teflon has a whole new meaning. Teflon means slippery, like they call politicians Teflon. Nothing sticks.
Exactly.
Yeah, under
Well,
fire,
there's a lot of
sticks. Anyway, go ahead.
quite a few issues moving forward. Which one has got your attention the most these days?
Well, this came in, and I'm really have to concentrate on my work with the wing generator and doing positive things. But this one is so glaring that it came in across my desk this week. And it appears this guy, David Hogg, that they had put up after the Florida shooting. There were 4 students out of 3,000 students. They only interviewed 4, constantly on CNN and the fake news media. Turns out this David Hogg guy, according to the sources that I found, graduated from high school in California a number of years earlier and was a plant.
Really?
And so now if you look on CNN, he doesn't appear anymore. But there again, they're creating fake news. The white-haired guy, what's his name? The CIA white-hair geeky.
Yeah, I know who you're talking
Anderson
about.
Cooper. Anderson Cooper.
Right.
Oh my goodness.
Right.
He's the kind of guy that they would someday they're going to peel his face off and he's going to be somebody else. But almost that's how it seems like. But anyway, you don't see David Hogg anymore because he's been exposed. But that just shows that this whole thing was a setup. Certainly people died there, which is horrendous to imagine that this was an entire setup, a staged event. That's why the sheriff's deputies were standing down for maximum effect. I mean, there has to be a serious investigation into these shootings, not by the people who were part and parcel to them, and by real investigators, not the powder puff investigators from the government.
Well, nobody's called me. I'd be more than willing to put down or investigate. It'd be quite a challenge, to say the least. It'd be quite a challenge.
After the fact, after the fact, and after all the evidence has been destroyed, like for example, there's a woman that saw the shooter, and he had full armor on with a helmet, and the other shooter at the same time had a stocking cap and a black outfit, like a tight skin outfit. So there were at least 2 shooters there. And this is right on. These are teachers afterwards being interviewed, giving a totally different description of this shooter. And she was nose to nose. Don't you think they'd ask, well, how tall is he? Because this student shooter was supposedly short. And because when the attorney walked up in the courtroom with him, I mean, the woman was head above him.
Right. He's not a very tall man, probably 5'7" or 5'8" at the most.
So don't you think you would ask this teacher who was there nose to nose with this guy, how tall was the shooter? Very simple question. Part of to identify the size or, the person that was there. Nothing like this comes out. There's no real investigation that happened there. And their primary go-to kid for news and trying to pump gun control is a plant whose father is an FBI agent. Ex-FBI.
We heard within a day or two that his father was an FBI agent. But to find out that he'd already graduated from a high school in California 2 or 3 years ago is very disturbing and very alarming.
Yeah, and so that was the strange thing, is he's attending this high school in Florida, and there's videos of him with some events in California. So his father's an FBI agent. All of a sudden, he shows up at this particular school in Florida as a student, and then there are people digging into this more and more. But anyway, like I say, that's something that came across my desk, and I'm not researching this myself. I don't have time. I'm very busy, and it's very disturbing that all of us have to be sidelined with this dog and pony show, which we now know was a dog and pony show, but where 17 kids died and teachers. But there's more to this. Who's behind this? Who staged this event? Where are these people, and why was CNN there, Johnny on the spot, which they never are. They always have, they've been caught many times doing green screens with supposedly their reporters on site when they weren't. And all of a sudden, within minutes, they're on site with these hand-picked student witnesses.
I don't know the timeline. Of course, I don't know if CNN has a local affiliate there near that high school where they could just jump in a van and be over there in a few minutes. A lot of unknowns to me as to how that worked out, Jim.
Yeah, but anyway, I just wanted to introduce that. And I'll tell you this: there's a lot of people working on this in the background and other events. It turns out that there was a lawsuit this past week about Las Vegas shooting because the autopsies were not made public. So there was a guy who's been following this that demanded the autopsies made public. A judge said they had to, and they came up with something like 57 faked autopsies. Clearly faked. And, so in very strange circumstances. But anyway, like I say, follow the people that are bird dogging these issues. John,
okay.
John, I can hardly hear anything. There is so much mic noise coming at me. I don't know what it's coming from.
Okay. Hold on just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient, and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at thelibertyman.com. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 14th of March. If you plan on going to Dallas to the Hear the Watchman conference, I will be the keynote speaker there on Saturday the 24th. If you want to get $20 off the admission price, get the promotion code from the banner there at my website at thelibertyman.com. We're visiting with Professor James McCanney. His website's linked on my links page at thelibertyman.com. And Jim, you've got not one but 2 weekly radio shows. Tell people how they can listen live and to the archives, if you would, please, sir.
Evening at 6 p.m. Central Time from WWCR Nashville, Tennessee is the James McCanney Science Hour at the Crossroads. And this week I have many, many topics to cover, dealing with electricity and power, electric cars, and electrical generation, and a lot of issues, including a discussion of who owns the grid. So that's interesting. That'll be a very interesting show. So that's the weekly show. Then that re-airs many times. All the ways to listen, including the archives, are on my webpage. Just scroll down to the center column, and all the ways to listen are there. And then my paidcast is a weekly science update on specific topics, and that's $3.95 a month. And you can join also on the webpage. And this week I'm covering, I believe it's nuclear fuel, where it comes from, and a lot of distressing facts about the entire nuclear industry as a source of energy.
Right. One of our listeners, he's a friend of mine. He's a nuclear scientist, and he has some fascinating insights into what really goes on in that industry. Okay. Well, you mentioned earlier, Jim, the wing generator. What's the status of that project, sir?
Well, it's I guess the best way to describe it is it's going bananas. And very shortly, there are going to be some major announcements. So I've been promising that, and that will, now we have set timelines and everything for announcements. So just be aware, and that will be coming out shortly. So, but just bananas in the background, the interest level and the people. I work on this day and almost night, long hours. So it's progressing, and there's so many. It's going in so many directions. It's hard to even describe. But a lot of it has to be in the background just to. That's the way things have to work today, because there are people too who don't exactly want to see this happen. But
along those lines, Jim, have people that live in the European Union been in touch with you about the wing generator?
Indirectly, yeah. I mean, we've got a lot of contacts going. Let's just put it that way. And these are ongoing awareness and things like that. But
the reason I asked, Jim, let me, if I can interrupt you, please.
Sure.
One of our listeners in Spain tells me that the EU, the European Union, makes it a crime. You would be arrested and prosecuted if you set up solar panels at your home in the EU. So I would expect the same thing would apply to getting power from wind as well, wouldn't it?
Well, it might be that it's at your home and not the government official location.
Exactly.
In other words, it's a controlled monopoly. In Germany right now, I was the host on the Power Hour a couple weeks ago, and I had as my guest a guy named Charles Artel, who has been invited by the German government to investigate Siemens and General Electric for bribing German officials to put in the 3-blade wind generators, which they now discovered don't work. And they were doing this. The reason they requested he come over, because he's been investigating the Clinton Foundation, and GE and Siemens were running the money through the Clinton Foundation to bribe these officials. So anyway, that's going to come out. But so they're looking for solutions. Germany shut down 7 of their nuclear power reactors, and the other ones are going to shut down by the year 2022. But they're desperate for alternative to standard power, primarily nuclear, in Germany. And so things are going on in the background, but it's really been clouded by General Electric and Siemens getting in there and sucking up all of the alternative energy money to put in things that don't work. And this is a much bigger story. I've been talking about this on my paidcast, on my radio show. And but the issue is I don't need government subsidies. My product works without government subsidies.
Well, that's the way it should be. We got a caller on hold. We got a bottom of the hour break. Stay tuned. Be right back.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. We're continuing our Energy Cleaner promotion, which began August of 2016. In this promotion, you get to buy an Energy Cleaner, $70 off retail, and a mattress pad, 10% off retail. $200 of the purchase price of the Energy Cleaner goes to Republic Broadcasting. This is a great way to help get energy cleaners out to people who need them and have some financial issues to deal with. And, of course, a great way to support Republic Broadcasting. Here's what you do. Send in a postcard. My address is John Moore, P.O. Box 201, Davidsville, Missouri. We pick a postcard every 2 weeks. If your postcard is drawn, you get the chance to buy the Energy Cleaner, $70 off retail, and 10% off the mattress pads. Put your name and your address, your telephone number, and your email address on the postcard, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 14th of March. My website is thelibertyman.com. That's thelibertyman.com. We now have another image posted of continents with new coastlines. It's the title of the film is Magma Volcanic Disaster. One I never heard of, but it's interesting. And it's posted out on my website at thelibertyman.com. Also, as my website, you'll find an energy cleaner for sale. This is my home business. I've helped hundreds of people get their life back, people who had debilitating pain, people who weren't getting a great night's sleep, and other matters that the energy cleaner has helped them get past those things, get their life back, and move on. You check out the details at my website at thelibertyman.com. The patent application information, the great testimonials from people like Steve Whitman, and go ahead and make your choice of the energy cleaner and the mattress pad to go along with it. The twin, full, queen, king, California king, the handy travel size. It's all right there. The energy cleaner is $285, shipping included. And keep in mind, I offer a 90-day money-back guarantee. I do take PayPal, the most secure way to make any payment online, MasterCard, Visa. You can send me a check. My toll-free outline, 24 hours a day. Here it is, 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. Yes, we're taking your questions, your calls, and your comments here at Republic Broadcasting at 800-313-9443 as we visit with Professor Jim McCanney, whose website's linked on my links page. Jim, let's continue.
Yeah, John. Just something quick here. I'll be talking more about this in weeks to come, but there's a movie that just came out. It's called A Wrinkle in Time, and it's being touted as a science movie. It's pure science fiction, and it takes place with a NASA guy. He goes through a wrinkle in time and goes into another dimension, and then his daughters go look for him, and it's like The Martian was filled with Matt Damon was filled with NASA hoorah type stuff, and so is this movie. So Hollywood is big these days on promoting NASA, and that's probably the best they can do, given that they can't do anything real. They're spending vast amounts of money on this SLS launch system, and I made a bit of a tactical error. I said that they were not going to build a second launch vehicle. They're not going to build a second launch tower. because they have to refurbish this tower every time the rocket takes off. And so they're only going to build one launch facility. But anyway, they're just going to be left in the dust. The Colossus, NASA, I guess Colossus would be the Latin name for something enormous, bigger than big. And but this movie, A Wrinkle in Time, oh my goodness, and it is not science, and it's meant for kids. Really, it's a severe distortion of reality that should never have been off the drawing board.
Well, if it's promoted as being science fiction, I don't have any issue with that. If it's promoted as being real science, that's a whole other thing.
Well, if you look on space.com, they're promoting it as a big boon for science. And it has nothing to do with science. I mean, it's pure. Space.com should not be mentioning it at all, but because it promos NASA, they have to pound the drum.
Well, that's nothing you and I are going to change, is it, Jim?
No, I just want people to be aware of this, that this is not science. The idea that you're going to go through, happen to walk through a door someday and end up in another dimension, I'm sorry, but, this is not science. And then the kids go searching for them, and then they say it's filled with scientific jargon, and the kids are so intelligent. No, this is strictly Hollywood, far worse than even Star Trek had some reality to it. This one is just fairy tale cartoon land.
Well, okay.
Unfortunate.
Let's move on.
Unfortunate that passes off as science.
It is unfortunate. It truly is unfortunate. Well, let's move on to the next topic from there, Jim. I know you pay attention to a lot of things. Any updates on, let's say, the Nazca line, for example?
Well, it's interesting that there was a new article on diamonds, and this came in, a listener sent this in to me, but there's 7 different types of water ice, depending on the pressure that's there when the ice is formed. And so there's amorphous, which is non-crystalline state, and then there's crystalline state, which takes on specific crystalline cell structures within the ice. But you get up to a crystalline structure, it's type 7, it takes incredibly high pressures to make this type of ice. And they have found it within the inclusions in diamonds. Inclusions are types of material to get inside a diamond and then are under very extremely high pressure because of the diamond carbon structure. So anyway, this is really interesting because they don't really know how this happens because it's so hot, supposedly where diamonds form down in the earth, that there's no way that water could be any form of ice. So once again, diamonds don't form in the earth. That's a myth. It's another one of the long-standing scientific myths, like plate tectonics, like so many other scientific so-called facts, that diamonds form in outer space. And it's a process that's been reproduced in the laboratory. I'll talk more about that on my show tomorrow night, but it's just something that very interesting that, in fact, the only place they've ever seen type 7 ice is in outer space. So it's not a form of ice that's ever been observed on Earth before.
Well, these are pretty amazing revelations. I'm not sure what it all means, though. Do you, sir?
Well, what it means is that diamonds are not formed deep in the Earth.
Okay.
They're formed in outer space with carbon in electric fields. And that's how you make diamonds in the laboratory. You vaporize carbon in a vacuum and then put in an electron stream, an electrical current of electrons, and it starts to form diamonds. The first it forms like a ball-type structure, a globular structure, which creates the pressure, and then the diamond begins to form inside, and so the water comes also because it's in the vicinity of a comet. So anyway, that's but the reason I mentioned this, you asked about the Nazca lines, because we're still trying to examine the rocks on the Nazca Plain, which are pulverized with microdiamonds on their upper sides. And so anyway, these have come into the atmosphere at extreme high velocities and penetrated into these rocks that are strewn all over the Nazca Plains. And so that was an event that probably took place thousands and thousands of years ago. But oddly enough, the mastodons that are in the Alaska riverbanks, where they discovered just tons of mastodon bones sticking out of the bank, were pummeled with microdiamonds on the upper side. So at the same time as that devastation that occurred that caused the death of the mastodons, which was the end of the Holocene, the period, with the mastodons, saber-toothed tigers, etc., was accompanied by an infusion of microdiamonds from outer space.
When you say microdiamonds, how small are we talking, sir?
They're, probably 128th of an inch.
That's pretty tiny.
Tiny. Yeah,
that's pretty tiny.
Yeah, very. I would say about that size. Yeah.
A good-sized grain of salt, in other words.
Well, yeah, even grains of salt, that would be super, super fine salt.
Okay. All right. Amazing.
Anyway, that's the story that I'm following.
The next question is, how did the diamonds get 1,000 feet or more underground?
Well, they didn't. They're found in certain areas. And we have to remember, too, that the Earth's surface is historically was not the surface we have now. That's a complete error. Because, for example, we have we have oil deposits that are 18 miles down. So those were at the surface of the Earth at one time in history. They didn't magically get down there somehow by like a hole in the ground because the pressures are too great down there for an infusion of oil. So that used to be the surface of the Earth. And so these events happened, and then slowly the Earth is constantly being covered with material that comes in from outer space. This is constantly going on, and that's the humor of the moon rocks. That supposedly, allegedly, the astronauts or the moononauts picked up rocks and brought them back. Well, the Russians picked up rocks and brought them back with unmanned space probes. But be that as it may, whatever is on the surface of the moon has nothing to do with the history of the moon. So they were measuring the age of these rocks and saying the moon is 4.5 billion years old. Well, no, the rocks you pick up on the surface might be that old, but that doesn't tell you anything about the core of the moon. It's lazy science.
So the diamonds found deep underground, or actually at one time were on top of the ground.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
And they come up through veins, but that means that the Earth was pummeled with these, and so only in certain areas where these veins of material come up is where the diamonds are coming up. But at one time, the Earth was literally covered with these diamonds, and so. But yeah, the other problem with the diamond being constructed deep in the Earth's core or in the mantle is that the diamond is the hardest material. Excuse me. The diamonds are the hardest material. So how could softer material around them put enough pressure on them to form? It's ridiculous. It's absurd. So the entire story of how that works is counterintuitive. It doesn't work.
I've read Jim, that the De Beers mine diamond cartel artificially makes the diamonds appear to be in far shorter supply than they actually are, to artificially keep the price of diamonds up.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt that at all. I would not doubt that at all. Yeah, in the diamond industry, it's really it's a bad industry along with gold. That's something funny too. If you take something gold that you bought in the U.S. and take it to a foreign country, they'll laugh at you. They will not buy it. They will not honor it. They'll just look at it, and when you look at real gold from other countries, then that is pure gold, you can see the difference. I mean, you just can see it.
Well, when I was in Vietnam, Jim, I would visit the Chinese gold merchants, and the gold that they've got has a very strong reddish tint to it. It looks nothing like the gold we have here.
Yeah, well, real gold, 24 karat pure gold, 99.999% pure, is not what they're selling in the U.S. They pawn it off at that, but it's not, unfortunately. So the American public is getting ripped off big time by the diamond and the gold industries.
Now, I've always heard, Jim, that 24K gold is so soft that it's not really suitable for jewelry because it's so soft that it would be an issue, and that's why we get 18K gold to make it stronger, more suitable for jewelry. Is that accurate or not?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. No, there's plenty of jewelry, which I have seen, and it's common in other countries, that is pure gold, and it has structure. It was sufficient to be a ring, unless you work on a jackhammer or something all day.
Right. Fascinating.
Which most people don't.
Yeah, well, like I say, the gold merchants in Vietnam, they were Chinese, and beautiful works of art, by the way. These gold merchants were selling, and it did have a very strong reddish tint to it, as opposed to the bright gold that we're used to seeing here in this country.
Interesting.
Right. It is.
We've kind of meandered through quite a few topics here today.
We have,
which is
good.
We
typically do that. We do typically do that. Okay. A lot of moving and shaking on geopolitical matters. We've got the Mueller investigation, which has been going on now for about a year with nothing of any consequence. He's finding where these guys didn't file their taxes properly and silly stuff like that, or lied to the FBI. Nothing to do with what he was originally appointed to do, is there?
No, it's just talk about meandering. And I don't know why that's still going on, and why, after being written a direct letter from Trey Gowdy to set up a second special counsel to investigate the fusion GPS and the Uranium One deal and all of the other true Russian collusion, why Jeff Sessions has not done that. It's everybody's standing around wondering, including Trump has tweeted about this, says, what does it take to get this guy to move? And so I don't know why he's even there. He recused himself the day after he was appointed, which is in itself totally bizarre. I don't ever remember a case like this in history where the Attorney General, the day after he was appointed, recuses himself from investigating the major issues going on of the day, and then sits on the sidelines, and and whenever he talks or whenever they ask him a question, he's more of a politician than the politicians. It's like, I'll do everything in my power to do it all correct, and everything's going to be done, by whatever he says, and it's like, what?
Yeah,
what did he say?
I agree, Jim. We got a break. Well, call number 800-313-9444. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 14th of March, visiting with Professor James McCanney. His website's linked to my links page at thelibertyman.com. Well, Jim, we do get today with exception. This calendar year is going to be an interesting one, and as everyone is, it looks like our president Donald Trump is moving forward what he was elected to do and his campaign promises, and I'm really hopeful about that. It looks like we got our last caller on hold here this hour. We got Patricia in Florida. Good morning, Patricia.
Oh, good morning, John. Thanks for taking this. I have a question after I heard you talking about the gold. Does that mean our gold eagles are not the same quality as, say, a maple leaf or a Kruger used to be?
No, I'm not talking about minted coins. And those are regulated, but I'm talking about jewelry.
Jewelry, yeah. Okay, I understand that. I wanted to make sure that I was hearing that correctly.
And there's other standards of gold when it comes to things that are specified. That's more strictly controlled, but jewelry, which is not controlled at all.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You answered my question, and thanks for the great show.
Oh, sure. Something else that's going on today, John, March 14th is Pi Day. In other words, the value of pi, which they have millions of digital calculations on the number of digits and the number of pi. But there's something going around that's trying to claim that the value of pi is wrong, and therefore calculations of orbits are wrong. And no, that's complete baloney. I don't know where that got started. That's almost like a flat Earth type thing. I hate to even mention these things.
Same people are promoting flat Earth. Yeah. It's amazing how these bizarre theories can actually take on a life of their own, isn't it, Jim?
It really is. Yeah, it truly is. But also, I should mention that somebody out there is using my name to try and promote some kind of Tesla thing that they're selling, and it's a scam. So I want people to. I've seen it in an email address, which looks deceptively like my email address. And then it says, buy some device, you can power your house and save electricity. That's not me. I don't know who it is. So anyway, just a heads up.
Well, we appreciate that, Jim. As we get more publicity about what we're doing, people are going to try to take advantage of that, aren't they?
Yep. Yeah, that's just part of the game, so people are aware that is not me, and buyer beware.
Okay. Jim, thank you. We'll have you back next Wednesday. Appreciate it.
Thanks, John.
Okay, top of the hour break. We'll have open lines after the break. Stay tuned. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen. J.R. Moore here, our second hour on Wednesday, the 14th of March. A prepper tip of the day, it's a twofer. First of all, a reminder to get your night vision now while you can. During a crisis, well, that's simply not going to happen, is it? If you can only get one piece, get yourself a weapon sight first. The second prepper tip of the day is I ran across, thanks to my engineer here at Republic Broadcasting, a brand of merino wool socks I was not aware of until today. The brand name is Fit Sock. That's Foxtrot India Tango Sierra Oscar Kilo Fit Sock. We hope to have some posted at my website under John's Survival and Tactical Gear later in the day. We're patiently in the green room, my friend Jeff Nyquist. Jeff is a gentleman who began a quest quite a long time ago, more than 20 years ago, to understand the true nature of the threat posed by international communism to not only the United States but the world in general. And his website is linked to my links page at thelibertyman.com. His website is jrnyquist.com. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning, John.
Well, sir, good to have you with us as always. Your being on this show has gotten very excellent comments from people who are regular listeners, men and women who used to hear you on my show years ago, 8-9 years ago. They're glad to have you back, and of course I am also. Jeff, the mass media continues to beat the drums of the non-existent collusion between President Trump, his campaign, and the Russians, and then trying to make something evil that is supposed to happen, which is the president-elect, once he was elected in November 2016, it's expected, it's normal, it's supposed to be the way it is, that the president's transition team would make contact with the major world powers, England, France, Germany, China, Japan, and of course Russia. That's expected and that's normal, isn't it?
Yes, it is normal. It's, the media is not engaged in delivering news anymore. Media is engaged in information warfare on behalf of a foreign power when it attempts to frame people in the government without real evidence for being in collusion with the foreign power. And I believe that ultimately the Russians think this game is funny because, look, those of us who are familiar with Russia's links to the far left in this country over the last 70 years plus, we know that it's the people on the left that are pointing the finger are the people who have really colluded with Russia in the past and in the recent past. And the idea of them pointing a finger at the President of the United States, President Trump, for them to accuse him is very strange. And it's only because they think the public is stupid and doesn't have any memory of the past that they think they can do this. And this game, which the public is completely unaware of, insofar as the public doesn't remember, you got to realize who was on the side of the Viet Cong in the Vietnam War. You just played the song at the beginning of the hour, celebrating our air mobile troops in Vietnam, the way they attacked this new form of warfare we developed. Look, it was Hillary Clinton, it was Bill Clinton who were protesting against our soldiers, and they were for the Viet Cong. It was Bill Clinton who went to Moscow and Prague behind the Iron Curtain in 1969 and 1970. And these people are now going to point the finger. These people and their appointees and their followers are pointing the finger at President Trump and trying to make a giant scandal for more than a year. And what one fact have they come up with? That the president or his staff met with some Russian officials like every president and every president's staff does in their official business?
That's right. What's that term that came up a couple months ago? Nothing burger?
Yeah, nothing burger. And now, it's so funny the way this plays with what the Russians are doing, because now the Russians openly assassinate people in Britain. I mean, this nerve agent they used on this Russian defector, this former Russian colonel, who was, I guess, traded for one of the spies we caught here. This Russian colonel and his daughter, they used this nerve agent, which is a Russian weapon. It's a very expensive weapon. It's a very difficult weapon to use, exposed to British policemen. And when the British Prime Minister demands an explanation and gives a deadline, the Russian response is, we're a nuclear power. You better not mess with us.
Right. Well, I've most people never get closer to a homicide investigation than reading a novel or watching a movie, but I've been involved in homicide investigations all my life, since 1973, Jeff. My professional opinion as a homicide detective is Russia used this particular nerve agent because they wanted the word to get out that they can do this to anybody they want, anywhere they want. Russia has operatives fully capable of using, for example, an ice pick to the brain or a .22 caliber bullet to the brain, walking away and leaving no evidence traceable back to Russia. They wanted to be found out. They're in your face, wanting to put the fear of themselves in anybody and everybody that they can get you no matter where you are. That's why they chose this method, Jeff, was to make that point crystal clear, that you're not safe no matter where you are. That's my opinion, Jeff.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there is no doubt they intended the entire world to know that they killed or attempted to kill these people. They were broadcasting to the world that we can kill you wherever you are. Britain is a famous country for giving sanctuary to Russian defectors. And they're announcing to everybody who's a Russian, whoever decided their government was evil and to come to the West, well, your number's next. And you better surrender now. You better give up now. You better realize who's boss. The British cannot protect you. We're a nuclear power. They're afraid of us. And pretty soon they're going to say, John Moore, we don't like your television program. We're going to kill you. And the United States better not mess with us. And who will they not kill next?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
They'll kill
right.
Jeff Nyquist because he supposedly hates Russians. Right? And all I'm doing is pointing out that the Russian government is doing things in broad daylight on purpose. This is very sinister. And nobody can argue that this is innocent, that this is a Christian thing to do.
Hardly. Well, Vladimir Putin was, I believe, a colonel in the KGB before his political career took off. You don't get to be a colonel in the KGB unless you're a cold-blooded killer, do you, Jeff?
Well, I don't think that Putin did. I mean, the thing is that the KGB, of course, is a huge organization, and it has a terrible reputation. It has the reputation the same as the SS in Germany. You know, the Gestapo, I should say, rather, in Germany. It is an organization that tortures people, that arrests people, that blackmails people, that assassinates people, that uses every dirty trick in the book to make people do its will, to make people work for it. There was a tragic story here not too long ago, about a man who hanged himself in Rostov in southern Russia. He had been living in a closet his whole life, his whole adult life. He had lived in a closet because housing space is so unavailable in Russia. And he finally gave in. The secret police wanted him to inform on somebody living in his building. And he had refused for a long time, and finally he decided to do it because they promised him an apartment if he did it. So he did it. He informed on this person, and they didn't give him the apartment they had promised, so he hanged himself in protest.
That's so sad and so tragic. But that's the way it's been in since 1917. That's why they've been conducting business, isn't it, Jeff?
Yes, it is. It's the way. It's hard for Americans to imagine this system in this country, Russia, and how it works and how it distorts people and how the people who come to power. I asked a Russian defector some years back, Colonel Stanislav Lunev. I asked him. I said, "Are there any good people in the Kremlin, in the Russian hierarchy, in the Russian general staff?" And he looked at me like I'd asked a stupid question. And he said, "These are not human beings. These are crazy persons." And he, as a colonel in the GRU, he worked directly for the generals. He was a debriefer for Gorbachev. He gave intelligence briefings to the chairman, or rather the general secretary of the Communist Party Soviet Union. So this is a man who knew those people, who'd worked with them directly. And his opinion of them was that they were psychopaths.
That's pretty scary. That's pretty scary.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's a pretty scary system of government. So yes, what you say about having to be a killer, having to be brutal, you imagine the house that Stalin built was built on the bones of 30 to 60 million Russians and other nationalities that were killed by that regime. We cannot in America imagine a government that in the lifetime of one person kills that many people in order to establish a new system. That's never happened in any other country until it first happened in Russia.
And then Mao Zedong was right on his heels when he took power towards the end of World War II, wasn't he?
Yeah, Mao killed more. Mao is the number one killer, and of course Mao had access to China as a country with more people, so he could kill more. And if they come here, they'll kill in proportion to the population of the United States. Communists took power here. Yeah.
Well, and it's been mentioned that one of the police officers who was undercover with American communists. What was that man, the Chicago gentleman who was one of Obama's mentors?
Bill Ayers.
Yeah, Bill Ayers was quoted along those lines by undercover agent that he was willing to set up the camps and murder Americans to accomplish his goals, didn't he?
Yeah, I think wasn't the figure 15% of Americans would have to be killed?
That's what I recall. That's what I recall.
Yeah, and you do the math there. That's probably around 50 million people right now.
Well, that sounds about right. All I can say is good luck, because we are not Russians. We are not Chinese. We are a people who are used to freedom. We have more privately owned firearms than any country in the history of the world, and more proficiency with firearms. But they'll probably use something like starvation to accomplish their goal, won't they, Jeff?
They use every single tactic or approach that they can use. They will use economic warfare. They will use, they are probably introducing toxins and poisons. I mean, if they're going to poison a couple people with nerve agents, what kind of poisons and toxins are they introducing into our food? How many of our companies are they infiltrating? Some of our practices, I wonder, some of our practices of our medical profession. How much sabotage is being done right now to our country that's on a very low-key level? I don't know. I know that they're absolutely diabolical in their strategies, the things they do. I don't know if you heard of the work of I'm thinking of his name now. He worked at the Pentagon. His name is Kevin. I can't think of the last name, but he wrote a book. I interviewed him before about how the financial collapse in 2008 was caused by a foreign power. And they don't know which foreign power did it because they used international continental exchanges, ICEs, to move money to do naked short-selling attacks on our financial banks. On the main one that collapsed in 2008, it started the whole process. So his whole analysis was that we were attacked economically by a foreign power through our own market system.
Well, Jeff, there's along those lines, you aren't necessarily aware of this. Back in 2008, I had a Sunday show here in Republic Broadcasting, and the last Sunday of June 2008, I issued a warning to all my listeners to sell all stocks and bonds before the end of September 2008 because of the soon-to-happen worldwide collapse of the stock and bond market. Now, that came from a bank that's not quite 300 years old. It's within six or 8 years of being 300-year-old bank, starting its 4th century. And that warning was to their own account holders that they should sell all stocks and bonds before the end of September 2008. Unless it was contrived and planned in advance, they could not possibly issue that warning with that exact date in mind, the end of September 2008. So I was just looking for the audio section here. It's hard to do two things at once. But we have the audio clip. It's probably moved to another side of my website where people can listen to me give that warning. It's pretty amazing stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. There's also the biography of the Secretary of Treasury under Bush, who wrote about how the Chinese had come to him saying that we had allowed the Russians and Chinese to invest in Fannie and Freddie Mac, and how the Russians were proposing to the Chinese that they caused the collapse of our Fannie and Freddie Mac home loan bank. And
well, Jeff, I located
right
I located the archive. It was 29th of June 2008, and I was quoting the warning from the Royal Bank of Scotland, which is about 5 or 6 years away from finishing their 3rd century and starting their 4th century of being a bank. Do you think the Royal Bank of Scotland gets their information from the Wall Street Journal or from people who make the news?
Evidently, they were connected with the people who make the news.
Obviously. Obviously. Here's our break. The call-in number is 800-313-9443. Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. It's taken 3 years before I could offer the inter-shelter domes for sale. During those 3 years, several different governments and militaries were taking all their production. The inter-shelter dome homes may be just what you've been looking for to provide affordable, energy-efficient, permanent, and attractive housing. These dome homes are prefabricated units that can be assembled in a few hours by 2 men with a ladder and simple hand tools. Check out the photos of these dome homes built in the Arctic, on tropical beaches, in suburban areas, and in forests. All the details, many photographs, and the pricing of the dome homes are listed on the left-hand side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. I think you'll find these homes are not only attractive, but they're energy efficient, and a bonus. You can disassemble them and reassemble them as many times as you feel you need to. Pretty great, huh? Something that's very, very unique. Check them out at my website at thelibertyman.com. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 14th of March. If you plan on being in Dallas next week, I will be the keynote speaker at the Hear the Watchman conference. Go to my website to get the promotion code to get $20 off the admission price. If you can't be there, you can get 20% off the live stream price. So that's right there at my website at thelibertyman.com. Visiting with Jeff Nyquist. His website is jrnyquist.com. Jeff, we've got a couple of callers on hold here. First, we go to Paul in New Jersey. Good morning, Paul.
Hello, gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it was in the news this week that Mr. Putin said that maybe Jews or minorities, such as the Tatars, were behind U.S. election interference. And I think it's important to remember that Russia is a big country with many people with potential dual allegiances within Russia, just like in the United States we have many different factions here with dual allegiance trying to steer foreign policy, so the same applies to Russia. Now, John, you are a former detective, and I would think one of the things you would know, the first rule of being a detective would be to take your time, weigh the evidence, and not rush to judgment. I mean, the fact of the matter is, what makes you not think that this couldn't be an MI6 or CIA job in order to frame Russia? After all, we've seen an overall policy of America and Britain to demonize the Russians, and we've seen them take it to such petty levels that we had to, meddle in Ukraine and topple the democratically elected Ukrainian government, and also the petty level of trying to demonize and get Russian athletes out of the Olympics on petty charges of, drug use.
Okay, well, let me respond here. First of all, I live in the world of evidence. The possibility of MI5 or CIA being involved is certainly a possibility, but in the absence of evidence, that's all it is a possibility. The evidence we've seen, the evidence I've seen, is if there was any Russian meddling, it did not rise to the level of changing the outcome of the election or changing what happened with the Electoral College. Jeff, do you have any follow-up on Paul's question here?
Yeah, I don't think that it's right to say that Britain or the United States as countries, the leadership want to have trouble with Russia. I don't think that's true, and I don't think it's true that we were responsible for the revolution in Ukraine. He must not know many Ukrainians, and he must not know the really history of Maidan Square and what's happened in Ukraine since 1991 to say that.
I am aware that we've actually funded color revolutions throughout the world, and to the point of several billion, I believe, that we funded in Ukraine to instigate this. And, of course, Victoria Nuland being right there on the ground.
Victoria Nuland's phone call does not prove that we caused the revolution in Ukraine.
So there's no such thing as a color revolution. There is no such thing. America does not try to instigate mobs in foreign countries to influence elections. That doesn't happen?
Oh, the United States has done that before. Of course, you know that they have.
Oh, okay.
But the thing is that the thing is do you think that Ukraine is oppressed by Russia? Do you think that's
not at all? No.
Do you think there are Soviet structures in Ukraine that keep the economy completely controlled?
Ukraine, by the way, is... Hey, Ukraine, let's put it just this way. Ukraine is free to, treat Russians who live, ethnic Russians, decently within Ukraine. And when you have Julia Tymoshenko saying that we ought to murder the ethnic Russians, a former prime minister of Ukraine, I think that would alienate the Crimeans and the ethnic Russians who live in the eastern provinces. And Russia, as my opinion is, was trying to interdict a genocide of basically neo-Nazi Ukrainians. So that's why I'm a sympathizer.
And the thing is, if you understand anything about Ukrainian politics, one of the first things you have to know is Yulia Tymoshenko is a Kremlin agent. And what she did by saying that about Russians, and that was publicized, was what's called in the Russian game a provocation. A provocation is when you get one of your agents posing as a friend of freedom for the country they're an agent in, provoking an incident which then justifies Russia to do something like invading the country.
Russia never invaded the country, as we know. There might be Russian citizens and others who joined to go fight their ethnic kinsmen in eastern Russia, eastern Ukraine.
You do know about the Budapest Agreement, right? You do know that there's a treaty in which Russia agreed to respect the borders of Ukraine as given at that time in the 1990s, right? Russia,
right, but I don't see why you would
signatories.
Yeah, but you as an anti-communist, you're basically defending that a Marxist, Mr. Khrushchev, when he gave Ukraine away from Russia and basically gave away Crimea, and so you're basically defending the actions of a dictator.
No, I'm saying there was a treaty in the 1990s. The Russians did not have to make a treaty in 1990.
Hold that thought, Jeff. Hold that thought. We got a bottom of the hour break. We'll be right back. Ladies and gentlemen, J.R. Moore here. We're continuing our energy cleaner promotion, which began August of 2016. In this promotion, you get to buy an energy cleaner, $70 off retail, and a mattress pad, 10% off retail. $200 of the purchase price of the energy cleaner goes to Republic Broadcasting. This is a great way to help get energy cleaners out to people who need them and have some financial issues to deal with, and, of course, a great way to support Republic Broadcasting. Here's what you do. Send in a postcard. My address is John Moore, P.O. Box 201, Davidsville, Missouri. We pick a postcard every 2 weeks. If your postcard is drawn, you get the chance to buy the energy cleaner, $70 off retail, and 10% off the mattress pads. Put your name and your address, your telephone number, and your email address on the postcard, and we wish you the best of luck. Thank you. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 14th of March. I have a new article posted at my website, an article I wrote. Look on the left side of my homepage at thelibertyman.com. A little bit to the bottom and left of my new headshot where it says the National Gun Control Debate, Chasing Technology, Emotions versus Logic. We've got a little more editing to do on it, but it's pretty much a complete article ready to go. And right at the end, you'll see the clip, the 20-second clip from the wildly popular TV show The Rifleman, where Chuck Connor shoots a 1892 Winchester 12 times in 4 seconds. That's pretty neat. Also, my website, of course, are energy cleaners. This is my home business. This is what pays the bill. I help people get healthy, and they help me make a living. That's how the energy cleaner business works. If you've got issues with pain, you need an energy cleaner. Not getting a great night's sleep, you need an energy cleaner. Want to get your life back, get yourself an energy cleaner. $285 shipping included. 2 American zip codes. The mattress pads that go with them. Well, we got twin, full, queen, king, California king, handy travel size. Everything's right there at my website at thelibertyman.com. Keep in mind, I offer for me to you personally a 90-day money-back guarantee. That's what I do for me to you personally. I do take PayPal, the most secure way to make any payment online, MasterCard, Visa. Yeah, you can send me a check if you need to. My address is right there at my website, thelibertyman.com. Here's my toll-free line, 24 hours a day, 800-592-9543. I say again, 800-592-9543. We're visiting with Jeff Nyquist, and Jeff's website is jrnyquist.com. Jeff, I want you to respond to Paul's comments there. We do need to move on. I don't want to take up the whole show here with Paul's questions, but Jeff, give us a response to what Paul was saying.
Yeah, the Budapest Memorandum was 5th December 1994. If the Russians wanted Crimea and believed it belonged to them, that was their opportunity to speak up. That was when Ukraine had nuclear weapons. The Russians wanted those nuclear weapons. The exchange was the nuclear weapons of Ukraine in exchange for Russian guarantees of Ukrainian independence. And that was what it was about. And look, the Russians didn't have to sign the agreement. He wants to go back to Khrushchev and say that I support some kind of communist dictator giving away territory. That's just a verbal trick that Paul is using. The fact is the Russians wanted the Ukrainian nuclear weapons. They saw no problem then with Ukraine controlling Sevastopol and Crimea, so they signed on. They made the agreement. The nuclear weapons in Ukraine were given to Russia, and the Russians gave their guarantee that they wouldn't violate Ukraine's borders. So it seems pretty simple, a breaking of an agreement guaranteed by Russia and Britain, and there were no consequences for Russia except for the sanctions. They basically annexed a part of another country's territory that they themselves promised not to do. I don't know how simpler it can be.
It's not more simpler. Paul, do you have one more follow-up before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I just think it's within Russia's rights to interdict what was going to be an obvious genocide, and you can see that because Crimea voted 95% to join Russia. Look how lucky they are. No genocide for them like what's happening to the Lugansk and eastern provinces of Ukraine. So it just goes to show you they were smart, the Crimeans.
Okay. Well, thank you, Paul. We appreciate the call. Any more follow-up, Jeff, before we move on to our next caller?
Well, I don't think anybody should trust the the supposed open and free and fair voting in Crimea.
Hardly.
I don't think that we're not talking about a real free democratic system here.
What was it? Was it Stalin who said?
Russia.
Was it Stalin who said something to the effect, "I care not who people vote for as long as I can control who counts the votes"? Something along those lines.
Yeah. He said it doesn't matter who people vote for; it matters who counts the votes. You know. So yeah, that's after he was.
I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen locally.
Yeah, he was. Stalin
I've seen
technically voted out.
Yeah,
sorry,
I've seen vote fraud. I've seen vote fraud myself, up close and personal here in Missouri. Here's our next caller. We got Johnny in Missouri. Good morning, Johnny.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Moore, and all my relatives out there. I got a couple of things, John, real quick, but my father was actually an instructor at West Point when Chuck Connors was there doing his studies.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's pretty wild.
The early to mid 1950s, along in there.
Yep, he just got back in country from Korea. It's really neat. I'd come in behind that last gentleman. You being a fact-based man, like to do investigative research, are you aware of the expositions from Peter Dale Scott, where he talks about the
I guess not.
intelligence services? Oh man, it is awesome because, guys, our enemy is not in a foreign country; it's right here at home, and it's mostly the intelligence services. Well, it's the criminality embedded within it to keep our businesses running on a war footing, and they won't let the peacetime manufacturing come forward.
There's
So
some.
go ahead, John.
There's just in the headline today that one of the main reasons, maybe the reason, that Secretary of State was fired was because he wasn't going along with making peace with North Korea.
Well, I thought it was interesting he was traveling to Africa when it happened, or when he got his first notice. Like,
Yeah.
Wow, what was he doing in Africa? That's
Well,
the
in
wrong
his days-
position. You know, we should be in South Korea or North Korea specifically, trying to make some
Well,
kind
in
of
these days of
inroads
instant communications, where you physically are doesn't matter that much anymore with instant communications. But it is interesting. Okay, Johnny.
You're right there.
Anything else? Yeah.
Yeah, are you a supporter of the Campaign for Liberty, John? I don't want to share the information if you're getting crossways with your format.
Is that connected to Ron Paul or Rand Paul?
Yeah. It was
Well,
an offshoot
I
of Ron
support-
Paul's.
Well, I support what the Pauls do, Rand Paul and Ron Paul both. Yes, sir.
Most excellent. There will be a symposium in Memphis that's being sponsored by the Campaign for Liberty. I believe it's the 26th of March.
Well, send me a
I'd
link
just
on
like to
that,
help.
John. Yeah, send me a link on that, and we'll see if we can get it posted on my website.
Oh, absolutely. That'd be great, John. Sure appreciate it.
Okay, Johnny.
Yeah.
Thank you for the call.
Good morning.
We appreciate it. Yeah. Jeff, did I mention to you that 2 years ago I was being part of a team to recruit former special forces to go to Ukraine and train Ukrainian special forces to be compliant with NATO special forces? Did we ever talk about that?
No, you never did.
Okay. Well, I was, and we were putting together a team to do that, and getting all the protocols together and all the logistics and so forth. There was a unnamed Ukrainian oligarch who was supposed to provide the funding. The funding never happened, so the mission never took off. But I was looking forward to it. I was doing my homework, doing my research. I was kind of expecting that we would learn more from, and of course, these guys are all Spetsnaz, by the way, of course. That's Ukrainian Special Forces. They all have the Spetsnaz protocols. I was expecting to learn more from them than they would learn from us, but it would have been a really neat mission to be part of, to help Ukraine maintain their independence and have NATO standards within Ukrainian special forces. It would have been a fun project, and unfortunately, it didn't happen. So I thought I'd share that with you, Jeff.
That's interesting. Yeah, that the whole Ukraine thing is very complicated, and it's a very interesting thing. But one thing about oligarchs from the former Soviet Union is most of them are basically working for Moscow, and you can't, even if they pretend to be friends, you got to watch them carefully, because it turns out over time they do things, that are kind of helpful here, but then they're really damaging the cause in other areas, and you have to wonder what the deal is. I've had a number of former KGB officers tell me that the oligarchs in the former Soviet Union were all recruited to be oligarchs by the KGB and by the Communist Party Soviet Union for a period of capitalism and fake democracy that they were preparing. So,
well, that makes perfect sense that they would do that, and of course I know I didn't really learn the identity or source of wealth for this oligarch in Ukraine, and quite frankly at the time I didn't care, as long as the mission would move forward. But it became a non-issue when the funding wasn't there, and we all went back to our normal lives afterwards. But it would have been a neat project, and I was sort of looking forward to being part of that. Ukraine's been through a lot. Stalin demonized the farmers there. Any farmer that owned 20 or more acres had the title of kulak. And it was a derogatory term. They were made out to be some kind of evil capitalist because they owned 20 acres or more of farmland. And many of them died in gulags, being shipped off to Siberia, never to be seen again, weren't they?
Yeah, they killed a lot of people. I mean, it's anywhere from 7 to 17 million were killed in Ukraine. And
it was within living memory. Within living memory. Which means, of course, there's men and women alive who were young, either young adults or teenagers, and they saw this up close and personal firsthand, where the communists came in there from Russia and murdered people and basically destroyed the area. Ukraine had been the breadbasket for much of Europe prior to that, hadn't it? And
they have very rich soil in Ukraine. Yes.
A friend of mine he escaped from Czechoslovakia, which is now the Czech Republic. He told me that it was Czech farmers that went in there in the 19th century and brought modern farming methods to Ukraine, which turned Ukraine into the breadbasket of Europe. Ukraine is similar to Poland. It doesn't have defendable borders. It's been invaded by multiple enemies over many centuries. It's a country of beautiful people that are highly productive, very bright. I found out that the world's largest aircraft, for example, is manufactured there. I didn't know that until I was told. So it's a beautiful place, and they deserve their freedom and their liberty, and to be left alone. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I think they do, and they were very brave. The fighting, there's a documentary about the Maidan Square revolution that everybody should see, because these people exposed themselves to bullets. I mean, it's a kind of miracle. The Ukrainian government got to the point where they couldn't slaughter them without the whole country rising up, and so the government basically broke and had to leave, had to flee to Russia. And
I've seen. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've seen the documentary on that. Yes, it's very moving. Go ahead with your follow-up, sir.
It is very moving, and I would just say that the fact that the president Yanukovych fled to Russia tells you all you need to know about him. When a man flees to Russia, you know on what side he's always been. Obviously,
clearly, and obviously that's the case. Well, that part of the world, I was in Prague last July. I may be back there again this summer. Very similar people in terms of their ethnic heritage, their culture, the part of the world they live in, the climate, and so forth. Beautiful people, beautiful climate, good growing season, highly productive, with a rich history of being independent. And they've survived communism. The boot was in their face for decades at the end of World War II. They survived it, and I find it rather ironic, Jeff, that the strongest anti-Muslim countries in Europe are the ones that had the boot of communism in their face for all those decades. I find that rather ironic, don't you?
Yeah, well, you see, the thing is that communist dictatorship doesn't convince people in their hearts to believe in it. And they remain, in essence, they still remain nationalistic in their thinking. Whereas in the West, our commercial culture has kind of eroded away our nationalism. So it's kind of interesting to see.
It is. And it's, it gives me hope that there's these Christian enclaves of the Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, a couple of others that are resisting the EU mandates to bring in unrestricted these Muslims into the countries. I read that Angela Merkel was fearful of being looked at as a Nazi if she didn't allow the unrestricted immigration of the Muslims into Germany. And I was, quite frankly, a bit surprised and shocked that she got reelected. How about you?
Yeah. Well, excuse me. Yeah, I would say it is surprising if you don't understand the kind of psychological conditioning the Germans have had since World War II. I mean, the guilt and the about the war and the national psychology of the Germans and the way that the left has really poisoned their discourse. The Germans have political correctness more than we do, and it's affected them. And so she's the most conservative person that they could probably have. But she came up in East Germany, and she lied about her background as an East German. She was really a leader in the Communist Youth Organization there, and she was trained in Russia. So Merkel is a very strange kettle of fish, and the Germans have serious national psychological problems.
It's become generational, and it's by design. Yeah. People 72 years and younger weren't even alive when the Nazis were doing what they were doing, which is basically almost everybody in the country. It's an amazing thing, this generational guilt that they've put on through people. Here's our last break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. We're back. J.R. Moore here on Wednesday, the 14th of March. We're our last caller on hold here. We got Joe in Rhode Island. Good morning, Joe.
How are you, John?
Really good, sir. What's on your mind?
Yes, I'd like to speak to Jeff for a minute. Jeff, could you give me an estimate of how many Christians were killed in the USSR between 1970 and 1917 and 1988? A rough ballpark figure.
Probably over 20 million, maybe over 30 million. It depends on how you define Christians. Christianity was ruled out. The churches were closed by Lenin. They were turned into armories, actually. Many of the churches were, or museums.
Museums,
and they executed a lot of priests, a lot of Orthodox priests. So it's since most of the country of Russia was Christian, since probably 80 or 90% of the country were Christians, then if Stalin killed 60 million, it has to be, it could be 50 million, it could be, if he only killed 30 million, it could be well over 25 million. So this is what we're looking at. Because we don't know. They falsified so many records in the Soviet Union. Stalin had all of the people that took the census. He had the entire census executed because they came up with a number too low, reflecting all the killings. And he needed them to reflect the country's population growth at a time he was killing them faster than they were reproducing. So that's the kind of killing that went on. How many were Christians? It's a hard one to say.
Yeah.
But
Are there any Christian missionaries? Are there any Christian missionaries there today working in Russia?
Oh, I'm
what
sure
is the accessibility of Christians from the United States going there and working with other Christians, fellow Christians, and maybe doing some research on the...
Right. Well, the pastor of my church was a missionary in Kazakhstan, a former Soviet province.
Yeah, I have a friend, a close friend, who was a missionary in Russia in the 1990s at Novosibirsk in Siberia. That's the biggest city in Siberia. And the KGB gave them their building for a church. Then they brought more than $1 million from Canada and the United States, and they built a new church. And then somehow the KGB got the building back, and got the church. And so they got a free building for $1 million built by Christians. They passed laws in Russia to prevent Christian proselytizing other than Orthodox. The Orthodox Church there is controlled by the secret police. So, anybody going there to do Christian mission work is doing something dangerous.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that.
Even today, in 2018.
Even today. What a shame. What a shame.
Joe, thank you for the call. We got to wrap it up. Joe, we're out of time.
All right, John.
Appreciate the call. Thank you. Jeff, thank you, sir. Have you back next Wednesday.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. That's it for the day. Get your medical supplies, your energy cleaning, your essential oils now while you can, your firearms and ammunition. Never, ever give up your guns. Please do have a fun, safe, productive day. And God bless America.